Well, the suffering of Gaza or Palestinians in Gaza will be discussed at a summit held tonight by France and Saudi Arabia. The issue of a two-state solution is also expected to be on the agenda. Let's bring into the conversation Senior Research Fellow at the Africa-Asia Dialogues, Thembisa Fakude. Good to have you on the program this evening, sir. So let's start with the summit that's going to be held tonight. The French and Saudi Arabia hosting, but France, more significantly, is expected then tonight to officially take the step of recognizing an independent or state for the Palestinian people, right? They will now be joining Britain, they'll be joining Canada, Australia did so as well yesterday. What has brought about this apparent change in Western policy on the Palestinian issue?
Well, it's all political, it's symbolic, particularly for the British, because they know that Keir Starmer in particular is facing serious challenges from people such as Jeremy Corbyn, who are likely to stand against him come next elections. So this is symbolic, but also at the same time it serves the political ambitions of these leaders, particularly in Canada, in Australia, where there's a sizable number of Muslims, France, and indeed in the United Kingdom. But it's very important also to mention that this is no excitement for the Palestinians. It means absolutely nothing. When you start acknowledging a two-state solution, you are basically saying that those people who are languishing in refugee camps, particularly in countries such as Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and Lebanon, and inside Palestine, there are a lot of refugees in Gaza, for example, and in the West Bank, who are hoping to go back to their homes. What happens to their dreams of returning to their homes? Thousands of Palestinians are stateless. They live under very unbearable conditions in these refugee camps. Majority of them are stateless, and they come from what is known as Israel, which was, to many of them, is regarded as Palestine 1948. They were kicked out of their land, and they want to go back. So once you recognize a two-state solution, those that came from what is now called Israel must basically, forsake their right of return and continue to live under this unbearable condition. So this is not going to solve any problem at all.
So what does it mean in reality? Because when we talk about the two-state solution over the decades, one of the main points of contention is if that then goes back to the carving up of territory, right? Which borders are then going to be recognized? What does this change on the ground, especially in the context where the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as recently as last night, was saying there will not be a Palestinian state?
Geographically, it's impossible to have a Palestinian state because the area which was designated to be a Palestinian state, in other words, the 1967 border, has since been occupied by the Jewish illegal settlers. Now, if you go to that part of the world, particularly in the West Bank, you've got all of these pockets of so-called townships that were supposed to be a Palestinian state. And it's just geographically impossible. You're not going to have any state with the current status quo, particularly with the illegal settlements. And Bezalel Smotrich, who is the finance minister of Israel, has since passed another law of further expanding the illegal settlements. So if you can imagine how Soweto looks like, for example, you're going to have an Aledi township being called Palestine, and then in between Dube and others are Israel, and then after that Mufulo is a Jewish state. It's just not going to happen. Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of Donald Trump, once suggested that there should be some bridges that will link all of these small little townships that are going to be called a state. But with the expansionist ideology and expansionist project, which is led by Benjamin Netanyahu and his ultra-right-wing alliances, right, it's not going to happen. So the two-state solution that they're talking about is a pipe dream. The area that was designated as what was supposed to be a Palestinian state has since been annexed by the Israelis, and it's gone.
Let me bring into the conversation then veteran international news journalist Sophie Mukwena, a familiar face here on the SABC, and I'll come back to you as well, Thembisa. But to you, Sophie, I want to ask the question then. You covered the South African team and Israel, in fact, making legal arguments at the International Court of Justice in the genocide case a little over a year ago. As things stand, if these Western countries who are saying they're going to recognize a Palestinian state, if that is more symbolic than practical, can we expect them to go as far, for instance, as joining the case at the ICJ like other countries have done?
The issue of Israel legal settlement in Palestine, many of these countries didn't support that report by Nevi Pillay that was commissioned by the United Nations. Now, secondly, when South Africa went to the ICJ, they didn't support South Africa's request to the International Court, that is an organ of the United Nations, to intervene and stop what's likely going to lead to a complete wiping of a particular group. Now, yes, it's symbolic recognition, but in terms of action, it would have been better if they have perhaps supported the ICJ case, the other case at the ICC, that is the International Criminal Court, where individuals will be held accountable, or you hold accountable those who have given instruction to encroach into Palestine territory, but also to commit human rights violations in Palestine. They were not there, they are not there. And therefore I agree that, yes, symbolically, it is a big statement, perhaps an optics thereof, as we saw the hoisting of the Palestinian flag in London. But the truth of the matter is, what Palestinians want now is action to stop the current killings. But secondly, to ensure that you negotiate a peace process that will also lead to the release of the hostages, those Israelis and other foreign nationals who are hostages in Gaza, and there you have to negotiate with Hamas. And therefore, these are the important immediate actions. Yes, recognitions and statements that doesn't translate into action are not going to help the Palestinian cause.
On that point then, Sophie, how much can move here in terms of the recognition of a Palestinian state and the desire for the Palestinians for statehood, a ceasefire, etc.? How much can actually move without the involvement of the Americans? Because they've been very critical of their other allies in Europe now recognizing a state for the Palestinian people.
That's a major problem. America will stand with Israel. President Donald Trump will support Benjamin Netanyahu. He has demonstrated this in recent time. For example, the decision now and the announcement that he's working on considering imposing sanctions on the entire International Criminal Court, those judges, the investigators, it speaks to he is always going to be on the side of Israel. Secondly, the fact that he refused to grant the delegation from Palestine to attend the UN General Assembly, however, allowing Benjamin Netanyahu to fly to America. It's another indication that he is going to side with the Americans, and it becomes problematic. And therefore, when you take these resolutions and proposals to the Security Council to recognize the state of Palestine, clearly America is going to use its veto power to stop that to be approved or to go through the UN Security Council, as they've done with some of the resolutions that were put forward in the Security Council. Right. And therefore, that will be problematic for Israel.
And I want to take one of your points back to you, Thembisa, around the Americans basically denying visas to the Palestinian delegation, the Palestinian Authority. Mahmoud Abbas, the president, also unable to be in New York for the leaders gathering this year. But I understand a virtual address will then be put together so they can have their stay. To what extent then does that curtail, Thembisa, any attempt by the Palestinians to advance their cause during a very crucial meeting at UN headquarters?
Well, it does indeed. But what is even more disappointing is the lack of solidarity from UN member countries, and also the lack of a strong statement from Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, in terms of condemning this and condemning what Donald Trump has decided upon. We have never heard of anything like this before. Yes, they did try with Yasser Arafat, but now with over 150 countries recognizing the Palestinian state, one would have expected that Mahmoud Abbas, of course, is also not a very legitimate, is not a legitimate leader of the Palestinians, because he has refused to hold elections in that part of the world, and he stole elections from Hamas, and if you all remember, in 2006. So he's not really a legitimate leader of the Palestinians. But be that as it may, he still represents the voice of the Palestinians, at least legally, within the United Nations. So one would have expected that all of these countries would have had a much more stronger solidarity with the Palestinian people if they really do want to see a Palestinian state. One, but importantly, one would have expected that the Secretariat from the United Nations would have been much more condemning of what Donald Trump has decided upon. But since, we've had nothing. In fact, Antonio Guterres can't even utter the word Israel is complicit in genocide, or Israel is complicit in the mass murder of the Palestinians. He beats about the bush, but he comfortably mentions Hamas. So there's a lot of double standards. And this whole business of the two-state solution is not going to be solving the Palestinian issue. It's not going to be contributing towards a ceasefire. In fact, what it's doing is going to allow Benjamin Netanyahu to dig in his heels. He has said that after the UN General Assembly, we must wait for what Israel is going to do, particularly directing the message to those who have recognized the Palestinian state. So this is the man who's going to continue with his barbaric genocide in Gaza and in the West Bank, as he's currently doing. So the two-state solution means nothing to the Palestinians, and it's not going to change anything on the ground.
Two quick final questions to you then, Sophie, as we end. On Thembisa's point, do the countries, former staunch allies, if I can phrase it in that way, of Israel and the US, they still are American allies to some extent, the French, the UK, Canada, etc. Do they have reason to be worried about the future of those two relationships, the one with Israel and the Americans, based on the recognition of a Palestinian state? And secondly, what about countries in the region? So in the Middle East, have they done all that they can to bring an end to this war?
Well, let me start with the developed North countries that are allies of the United States of America, and by extension, allies of Israel. As we pointed out, the recognition doesn't do much. It's a statement, and also they don't commit to putting a stop in relation to supplying Israel with arms. Disarm Israel. Don't supply Israel with arms. But on the other hand, yes, U.S. will issue a statement in support of Israel and perhaps take a swipe on those allies. But it's not an issue that can take perhaps those countries and America to war. It's something that it will be statements back and forth. On the issue of the Middle East countries, the Arab League and the Arab countries, the problem is they do the same. They issue statements, but they are not doing much to help the Palestinians. I mean, and one understands, some of them are really friends of the United States of America. Mm-hmm. And we saw recently with the attack on Qatar how difficult it is to send a strong message. It's just statements. And therefore, the other problem in the Middle East is that the Middle East countries, the Arab League member states, are not doing enough. And therefore, I can't see a strong action.
Okay. Sophie Mugwena, thank you very much. Thembisa Fakude, thank you to you as well. Thank you so much, both of you, for making time to be with us on the SABC this evening.